Okay, I think we're on now. If everyone is listening, hello, good morning. My name is State Senator Ben Hueso, and I'm joined by Michael Vu, that works for our County Register of Voters here in San Diego County, and we wanted to have this event specifically to guide voters through this election process. This is a first of its kind in our state's history, mail ballots only. Although we've been voting by ballot or allowing absentee ballots to be collected in California since, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Vu, back to 1962 approximately, if I'm not mistaken. But I know in our country's history, the absentee ballot process actually started during the Civil War in the 1860s, when soldiers were allowed to cast their ballots out from the field from out in service of their country during the war. So this is not a new process, but we wanted to engage the public and tell them about what will be happening. I'm not fully informed, and I want to make sure everybody is fully informed, and we ask every question today so that people have all the facts. There's been a lot of misinformation going around about this election, whether it's going to be fair, whether there's going to be tampering. So we want to make sure that we're going into this election season fully informed and fully aware. So I want to thank our director locally in San Diego County, Mr. Vu, for joining us. Mr. Vu, please, if you would, we're here to listen to you, not to me. So I'll turn the mic over to you and let us proceed.
Senator Hueso, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity and really speaking before your constituents here. This is a very important election. Not only is it an important election because of the nature of it, which is a presidential election, and we conduct it every 4 years, but there's a lot of things happening in our world right now, and all of these confluences of events are going to make its day to effectively this election, where people are now going to be able to voice their choices and their selections across 196 contests that we have throughout the entire county, not just the presidential race itself. So getting an opportunity like this whether it's in a virtual format or whether we had the ability to be in present is always a great thing, as there are a tremendous change in the way that voters are going to vote in this upcoming election. And so I do appreciate the opportunity to share with all of your constituents and those that may be listening and that are not necessarily constituents, but really do need to be informed about how this election is going to be conducted. With that said, I'm going to share my presentation and slide deck. Hopefully you're able to see the slide deck now, and I'm going to go ahead and proceed. But we are now, the other aspect of this election is now we are conducting it under the cloud of a pandemic. Never in my career had I ever envisioned that we would be conducting an election in this manner, where it's under this cloud of the pandemic, and where people's risk and health is at stake. And so certainly the state legislature, yourself, as well as the governor, chimed in this respect and proceeded in policy-wise to kind of provide a path moving forward as to how this election was going to be conducted and what the options were for counties and elections officials like myself to be able to proceed. So let me just say happy E-28. We are 28 days from election day, but as you have stated, Senator Hueso, is that we have now issued to every single active registered voter in our county a mail ballot. It's either in your mailbox or it's traveling and getting into your mailbox. And that is one of the responses associated with this upcoming election. But I really want to make sure that I kind of set and frame this election out appropriately and why these respective changes, and give the reasoning behind decisions that were made, because they are very important. So as you may recall, back during the March election, at that point in time, we had neighborhood polling places. We had 1,548 polling locations. We had over 7,000 to 8,000 poll workers that served and volunteered their time for us during that early presidential primary election, normally done in June, but was pushed to back to March, just so that we could, if you will, the state had presidential nomination and the candidates coming through the state, and so California would matter in terms of who would get nominated from all the respective political parties. But we conducted the election with really no impact as it related to the pandemic. Election day kind of went off without a hitch. We conducted the election. We had implemented a new voting system when we did that. It was the first time since 2004 since the county had introduced a new voting system. So our focus was on that. Certainly the other new thing, relatively new, was conditional voter registration at the polling place level. That got us concerned associated with how conditional voter registration would work, because we saw the 2018 impacts with the long lines here at our office. So that's where really our focus was. That's where the voters' focus was, the ability just to vote. Well, voters, although may not have been impacted on election day, shortly after that time frame, we kind of knew that there was a virus going around at that point in time, but it really didn't hit the states. But it quickly did in the month of March after we conducted election day on March 3rd. And the governor issued the first executive order asking all non-essential workers to shelter at home. And now for our office, we go into a 30-day period of certifying an election after every given election. So after the March 3rd election, we were into our certification canvassing period, is also what it's known, where we have to reconcile everything that the poll workers do, make sure that we're verifying and validating all the mail ballots and provisional ballots that were cast and counting those that we could, reconciling what we call the 1% manual tally, making sure that everything is accurate in terms of how the voting system was counting votes and manually counting actually paper ballots that voters had voted on, so we can match it up against what we saw on file as to the tabulation system itself. Doing all that verification before I could ultimately certify that respective election. During that same time frame, though, we were heavily impacted. We were, when you think about our office goes from a staff of 65 full-time employees, and we balloon up to approximately 1,200 additional seasonal staff members that come onto our into our office and help us out for an election. That is not including the 7,000 to 8,000 poll workers that we bring on board. So effectively, for one day, we become one of the largest employers for that one day. But as you can imagine, trying to certify in the election when the governor is saying that everyone should shelter at home except for essential workers. Well, our office is essential workers. We were designated as a critical infrastructure of the federal government after the 2016 presidential general election, as you may recall. So elections came under the umbrella of a critical infrastructure. Critical infrastructure also designations are like the power grid, the waterways, the transportation corridors. That would now effectively we were classified and categorized under the same protections, if you will, and eyes and ears as to protecting democracy, protecting elections. So having said that, our office had to remain here. We had to figure out how we were going to socially distance and physically distance, and to be able to really certify the election on time, even though the governor extended that window of certifying the election. During that same time, though, as we were during those same weeks, the Secretary of State's office reached out to me, reached out to a number of my colleagues, reached out to advocacy groups, reached out to legislative representatives, reached out to the governor's representatives, and formed a task force to talk about November's election. What the state realized was that local elections officials, as well as the state, realized is that this pandemic was going to last for a long period of time, and we needed to make sure that local elections officials like myself, as well as this office, had enough time to prepare for this upcoming election. And so that's the preparations that we've been conducting. Something that is normally done in a 4 to 6 year period to prepare for is now doing it within a 4 to 6 month period. You really just don't do this if you're an election administrator of all these respective chains. However, these are extraordinary times, unprecedented times, and we're having to make that respective pivot. There were many debates that were going back and forth amongst all those respective groups, but ultimately what I appreciated of the legislature as well as the governor was decisive and quick action. That way, they gave enough time for us to be able to proceed with the election. As much time as possible, at least. As I mentioned again, these changes that you're going to hear today don't necessarily happen in such a short window of time that I've ever participated, and I know my colleagues as well throughout not just the state of California, but the entire country itself. So let me get to the really after the policies were decided upon. The governor issued an executive order, 2 of them. The first one came in May, saying every single registered voter was going to get a mail ballot. And then the second executive order that came in June, early June, was that would there be polling locations? And the answer to that question is yes, there would be polling locations. However, there would be an additional option for elections officials to select from. And if they did select the options, then there was a number of subsets of requirements that we would have to abide by. So once we were able to understand the policy implications, now we were able to, as an office, be able to wrap our arms around what did that mean and how do we move towards implementing any of the respective options should we go down that path. And for us, that's all the details of how to even conduct elections. And there are tens of thousands of small pieces that if any of them goes wrong, it could be a catastrophe or a systemic issue. And that's, of course, something that we had to really dissect here at the Registrar of Voters Office. So we didn't really get a lull. Our office, as essential workers, as critical workers, really remained here. Normally, there's a lull of after conducting a March election that we go straight into having some time off to kind of debrief, finds out what the lessons learned were, and really just kind of absorb everything that just happened. We really did not get that opportunity. So for us, I normally say that elections are like a marathon. You build up to that endurance and you wait for election, the marathon day to run that 26.2 miles. Well, we are now really at doing a sprint of an ultra marathon because we have been running since last year, preparing for March, and then just running right into the preparations of the November elections to really put all the pieces together. So as you can see here, once we were able to figure out all the details, we needed to make sure that there is number one goal here, is if you're going to change the model on voters, is that they need to be informed. So the number one goal is, besides and these respective points that you see on this slide, is not just something that you expect of our office, which is integrity of the election process, accuracy, transparency, security over the elections. Now we had to balance that and prioritize creating an environment where voters could vote safely and in a healthy way in a safe environment. And how do we build that environment? Also, the second piece of this, which is priority for us, is, as I mentioned, educating the public and informing the public. So there's really no surprises across the 1.9 million registered voters that we have in our county. And so we've launched into the most robust, comprehensive voter education and outreach campaign that we've ever done in our county ever for this office. As you can see here, really what's emblematic is that it encapsulates this election is our Vote Safer San Diego logo that you see here about every single voter receiving a mail ballot. Voters need to be made aware of that, what are the best practices of voting that mail ballot, how to return that mail ballot, vote that mail ballot, as well as what are the in-person voting options, because those are fewer, but there are changes around the duration of the number of days that they will be open. So let me just kind of give you a really kind of a brief kind of characteristics of the election. I always say that there's a characteristics of every election. So we're going into this election with 1.9 million registered voters. We just crested over that number, and that number seems to just continue to grow. We are over 200, nearly 250,000 more registered voters on our voter registration rolls than this time in 2016. And this number is actually old. We're now at 1.91 million registered voters, and October 19th is the registration deadline, and we've still got some time left before that occurs. The total number of local sample ballot and voter information pamphlets that is circulating and getting mailed to voters right now is over 2 million sample ballot and voter information pamphlets. Now, you may ask yourself, why is there more pamphlets going out than there are registered voters? Well, we serve 5 additional federally covered languages. Besides English, we have Spanish, Filipino, Vietnamese, and Chinese that we federally are required to serve. And that's based off of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Now, you may ask yourself, well, how many people there are you going to bring on this election as a result of the pandemic? We're going to bring on 4,500 seasonal staff members. And as part of the pandemic, we are no longer paying poll workers a stipend, but we are going to actually pay them an hourly wage. So now they are really effectively an employee of the county here. So we just effectively, the county is probably around 18,000 employees, and we're bringing on 4,500 additional people. You can just see how much that grows percentage-wise, the county employee population of our county. But that's how many people that we're going to be bringing on. Although yesterday was when we had the delivery of mail ballots to every single registered voters, know that on September 18th and 19th, we were already mailing and emailing ballots to our military and overseas voters. So they've already had a 45-day window head start in terms of voting, which is always 45 days in advance of election, because that's under the Military Overseas Voter Empowerment Act, which is, again, another federal law that says we have to issue ballots to our military and overseas voters 45 days in advance of the election. Now, let's talk about language, because I know that, Senator Hueso, you represent a very diverse community out there. Besides those 4 federally required languages, and then the 5th language being English, we also, because of the state California Voting Rights Act, we also are now covered under the California law, California's version of the Voting Rights Act, for Laotian and Japanese, which are new, as well as Korean and Arabic, which was existing from the March election. So we have a total of 9 languages that we support here in our county. Let me just say, as I said before, is we have 196 contests on the ballot. And when you overlap all those different contests with again, and those boundary lines against one another, it's going to create 842 types of the ballot, what we call ballot types. You all get to vote on one of those respective ballot types. Those are your eligible contests, but know that there are 841 other versions of that ballot circling around the entire county. That's the complexity of our county these days. But you can't just stop there. Why? Is because if you think about the total number of ballot types, which is 842, you have to multiply that by those 5 languages. And when you times those 2 numbers together, you get 4,210 variations of the ballot in our county. That's how complex our county, when you think about how many political districts there are, which are over 430 political districts, what contests could potentially make it onto the ballot. In this case, 196 across the entire county. And then you have to multiply by the total number of languages. So when you think about conducting elections, from my perspective, you've got, yes, English, but you got 4 other languages running in parallel to that, just shortly behind it, to making sure that everyone, and we're representing everyone, and everyone has equal access to the ballot. Now let's talk about turnout. The last 4 presidential general elections that we've conducted, the average turnout has been a 79.5% turnout. Our county comes out to vote. The highest percentage turnout was the first Obama election in 2008. The last presidential general election was an 81.5% turnout. And when you think about this percentage, and you think about the historic number of registered voters we have on our books now, if we can even conservatively say that there's going to be an 80% turnout, we're going to see about a 1.5 to 1.6 million voter turnout when we think about it from a total number perspective. That's a unfathomable number that I could ever imagine, but that's kind of where we exist today. And for me is when a person receives a mail ballot, their likelihood of voting that mail ballot is going to be more likely than an individual whose only opportunity is going to a polling location. So let me kind of get into the aspect of what does this pandemic mean and why did we make the respective decisions that we did, as well as the state recognized. Well, they recognized 2 fundamental aspects of conducting an election. 1, you need poll workers. 2, you need polling locations. And if you think about traditional neighborhood polling locations and poll workers, you know that a big number of individuals that help us during an election are individuals that are 65 plus in age group. Well, this is also the same age group that is high risk of contracting and having major issues associated with the virus. So that's number one. That creates a level of uncertainty around our universe, which we need to be date certain because we have one day to make sure that everything goes off without a hitch. And that's, of course, Election Day. The second piece to this is our polling places. One of the lessons learned was that although we were lucky in not having to be impacted on Election Day as a result of the March election, because we had an early primary, we saw other states, other jurisdictions throughout the entire country that they had to hold their primary election under the cloud of the pandemic. And what did they experience? Well, they experienced where polling locations pulled the rug underneath them, private locations saying, yes, you can use us, but then the pandemic hit and they said, no, you can't, creating liability concerns around the use of their facility, or maybe the fact that the location was just simply too small to facilitate any level of social distancing. So again, that created disruption for voters and confusion for voters, as well as a mad scramble for elections officials like myself to be able to conduct an election with success. And so when you have these components as now a big question mark, how are you ever going to be able to get off of first base and able to and launch to conduct an election of the size and magnitude of a presidential election? Let me go through the numbers here. If you are a data person listening in, if you look at the March election, this is effectively the chart based off a percentage and age group of those individuals that served as a poll worker for us during the March election. And as you can see here, that 65 plus age group, 30% of that age group is our 65 plus or older age group that served as a poll worker, which now is in question. Would they sit out in our minds? Would they sit out in this election? Would we be able to get enough poll workers? And we were anticipating that we would need around 1,600 polling locations or precincts. That means we would need around 9,000 poll workers. Well, that's a big issue in itself. But you can't stop there. And the reason why is because if you look at the other side of the spectrum, 20% of our poll worker population are in the 16 to 19 year age group. And when you add those two percentages together, you've got 50% of the population now in question. And yes, there may be questions about why can't I have my same precinct? Well, our whole lives have been upended as a result of this pandemic. And this is another aspect of how it's upending elections as well. So we really had to think really hard about whether or not an election could be conducted in a neighborhood precinct world. Okay, let me go to polling places really quickly. 69% of voters in our precincts in the March election reported to a private facility, a private location of a small business, a pizza parlor, a pet grooming store, a neighborhood garage, and so forth. And as I mentioned, again, you can't live and conduct an election and to the size and magnitude when you've got 69% that's in question. So we really needed to look at the public facilities portion of this. We needed to ensure that we were minding what our local public health officials were saying and determine how do we create confidence and availability of use and certainty. Certainty is something, of course, we are all experiences uncertainty, and how do we build to certainty, and particularly in an election. So we had to look at public locations, we had to look at large locations, we had to look at all the geography within our county, which is diverse between urban and rural, city and unincorporated, and to really determine how to ensure that you have a level of access and being able to issue ballots to voters. First of all was giving everyone, every registered voter, a mail ballot. Second to that was establishing strategically much larger public facilities throughout the entire county that is no less than 2,000 square feet or an average of 2,000 square feet of space throughout the entire county. And when I talk about accessibility here in this respective point that you can see here, we've got to think about not just voters with disabilities, we've got to think about transportation corridors, we've got to think about population density, we've got to think about just the urban and rural that I had mentioned before. We had to think about socioeconomic locations as well, about, again, access to the ballot. And then finally, the last point here is we had to think about those 4,210 variations of the ballot, or the 842 ballot types, to make sure that we are strategically citing every single one of those locations throughout the entire county to meet all those accessibility requirements and availability for voters should they go to a polling location and not vote their mail ballot. Okay, so this is effectively, on the purple here, is what the law provides in kind of in a nutshell. Again, let me just reiterate, every single voter is receiving a mail ballot in this upcoming election. In the last March election, 74% were already a permanent mail ballot voter. As Senator Hueso said, is that we have historically voted by mail in our county. If we were not conducting an election under the world of a pandemic and we were conducting it in a traditional format, 78% of the electorate would already be receiving a mail ballot. So we're really talking about the 22% that is out there that needs to be informed that they are going to receive a mail ballot for this upcoming election. But everyone needs to be informed about that, as well as what the good practices are. I'm not going to go through the March's profile because I want you to really compare that against what we're doing in November's election and really talk with you about what we're doing in November's election. And what are we doing? Well, number one, we are consolidating polling locations more heavily as opposed to having 1,548 at a combination of private and public locations for one day on election day. We will have 235 super polling locations is what we're calling them. And they're going to be spread throughout the entire county. And they're going to be open for 4 days, and they're going to be primarily public facilities that is out there. Again, once we are able to secure a public facility, we know we have them as a certain for use, as opposed to potentially any private location pulling the rug underneath us at the last minute. Now, having said that, we do have a couple of private locations because, again, we're trying to meet all these other requirements of citing a location strategically for voters to access their respective ballot. Now, I really want you to turn your attention to the number 235. If we really just wanted to meet the minimum, then we would just need to exercise option number 2, which is the ability to consolidate, which is the model that we're under here and what we're working towards for November's election. But if we wanted just to meet the minimums, what we would need was only 185 locations in the county. We chose to actually add more. Why? For us, was never about a legislative threshold. It was not about 1 for every 10,000 registered voters. For us, was about other data metrics. How many people came out and voted in the 2016 presidential general election at a polling location? How many people are registered? How many people do we anticipate as a result of the pandemic that may go to a polling location? That we're highly encouraging voters to vote that mail ballot because every voter is going to get one. How much of that is going to factor in? Regardless of all of that, we said we needed to have more. And so we are adding approximately 30% more locations than what the law provides. And again, for us was about voters and the ability to make sure that this is the largest election turnout that we ever conduct in a 4-year cycle, maybe the largest turnout that we will ever conduct in the county that will top the 84% in 2008. But bottom line was we needed more to really distribute voters out, to not produce long lines, and so that there wouldn't be not just in crowding, and that where we expose each other to the virus. And so that's why we added more to the county to make sure that there was access across the board. Now, as part of this consolidation model, we had to add more mail ballot drop-off locations. Prior to, there was no requirement to have mail ballot drop-off locations. And back in 2014, our office decided to introduce mail ballot drop-off locations, not by law, but because we wanted to provide a new service. And so we took it upon ourselves to adopt that with the Board of Supervisors, a support in all of that. Well, that program since 2014 has now grew to 62 during the March election, where we were open for a 7-day period. But because of the pandemic, now we need more than double the amount of locations over quadruple the amount of time. So for this election, starting today, actually, we have 125 out of the 126 locations open for people to drop off their respective mail ballot throughout the entire county. And if you have any questions about where they're at, go to sdvote.com. Now, there's something key about how this model is different than the third model here in purple, which is the Voters' Choice Act or the Vote Center model. Voters are still assigned a polling location to go to. That's critical in this election. When you think about turnout and you think about the virus and the combination and clashing together, it are ingredients for potential disaster, either from a safety perspective or a person's convenience of being able to vote. So for us, if you're planning on voting, planning on going to a polling location, do so across that 4-day window starting on October 31st through November 3rd, because all of these respective locations are going to be open for 4 days as opposed to in the March election, 1 day across 1,548 locations. That's really important. What we're trying to get for voters is we want to distribute voters still across those 235. That's why we're still assigning voters to one of those 235 locations. If you want to know where your location is, because it's most likely has changed than where you've historically gone to, it's going to be on the back of your local sample ballot and voter information pamphlet, or there is a polling place finder on our website as well. Now, let me get to this last point when it comes down to our poll workers itself. As I mentioned, these poll workers are going to be paid an hourly wage. No longer is it a volunteer because it's not just a 1-day commitment. It's now upwards of a 9-day commitment. Why? Because you got 4 days of these locations being open, these super polls locations being open. No longer is it a 2-hour training. It's a 2-day training because of all of the new and changes that we're introducing to these super polls locations. So there's 6 days. We've got 1 day to set up the location, 1 day to break down the location, and then 1 day for receiving all the supplies that are going to be dropped at every single one of these polling locations. Now, if you served as a poll worker before, you know that you didn't take 2 days worth of training. You took 2 hours worth of training. You didn't serve for 4 days. You served for 1 day when you went the polls were open. As well as you normally picked up your supplies 10 days in advance of election day, and now we're drop shipping these supplies at the actual site itself, which all of these pods are actually coming onto our county campus as we're staging all of that to drop at all of our polling locations that are out there. And then again, let me just say we've launched into this really robust campaign overall. I'm not going to go into all the respective details here about this upcoming election and our ability to manage 100% of all voters receiving a mail ballot. Let me just say again, we have been building for decades to prepare for a situation like this when it comes down to mail balloting. The infrastructure, the processes, the safeguards, the security, all of that has already been built. Yes, we've brought on a couple of more pieces of equipment to handle the surge on the processing side, the back end portion of this, but there is no question in my mind that the U.S. Postal Service is and has the capacity, the outbound as well as the inbound capacity to get us their ballot back from you, as well as getting the ballot to you. I just know that for me, I've already received my wife and my son has already received their ballot yesterday, and I anticipate mine is going to be coming in the next couple of days. But voters should already start receiving their ballot in the next week in their mailbox. And so there's a number of different things here, but there's one thing, if you have any concerns with the U.S. Postal Service, is that last point on this slide, and I will absolutely make sure I send the slide deck to Aaron and Senator Hueso to distribute to all of you, but it's the last point there. If there's any concerns about the U.S. Postal Service, the legislature has already stepped in with Assembly Bill 860 as well as Senate Bill 423, and this one point down here says, so long as that ballot is postmarked, that mail ballot is postmarked by Election Day and received 17 days after Election Day, that ballot is timely cast. Let me say that again. The operative term here is postmarked by Election Day, November 3rd, and so long as we receive it 17 days after Election Day, that ballot is considered a timely cast ballot that we can receive, verify, and count. Okay. Let me get into what should voters anticipate. Let me just first say we highly encourage voters to stay safe, vote safe, and the best way to do that is at your home. Vote that mail ballot, get it back to us through the U.S. Postal Service, and then or any of our drop-off locations or at the Super Postal sites that we will have open on October 31st for the 4-day window. But if you're planning on going to a polling location, we know that there are going to be voters that desire to vote in person. That's okay. We know that individuals, they believe that is part of democracy, that exercise of having and touching and getting that experience of going to a polling location. And that's how they've always done it, and that's how they're dead set on doing that. It's okay. What we're also saying, though, is that we know that there are other population voters that need to vote in one of these respective locations. Those are voters with disabilities, voters that didn't receive their mail ballot. And so it's too late to send them a mail ballot through the U.S. Postal Service, perhaps, as we get closer to election day. There are going to be people that received their mail ballot and made a mistake, and so they need a replacement mail ballot. And then there are going to be voters or individuals that did not register on time by that October 19th timeframe and now need to exercise what is known as conditional voter registration, or what you may hear of it as same-day registration, which is the act of registering because you're not registered at any of these at your assigned location, and then voting a provisional ballot. Okay, so that's where our focus is at, and what we are highly encouraging voters to be cognizant of. Now, in person and voting at polling locations, we are expanding our technology from our satellite locations, and we had 4 satellite locations in March's election, namely our electronic poll book, beyond just our new voting system itself. But the electronic poll book is effectively an iPad that has the list of every registered voter on it. And what it also has is the disposition and status of everyone's mail ballot. So if Senator Hueso, not saying that Senator Hueso would ever do this, but let's say he tried to send in his mail ballot and tries to go to a polling location and vote there, the poll workers will know that. The poll workers will know that we've already received Senator Hueso's mail ballot. And so the only way that Senator Hueso would be ever able to vote is through a provisional ballot. That is a ballot that would go into an envelope, get brought back to our office for verification, and we would only allow him to vote once. Okay, so this whole national discussion about going out there, voting your mail ballot, and then going to polling locations, don't do it. It's against the law. It's a federal crime to try to vote twice, and we will know. And the poll workers have been trained, and the electronic poll books will let the poll workers know what to do with this individual that's showing up. Now, let's just say that Senator Hueso wants to vote in person, never votes his mail ballot, and sends it back to our office. Poll workers will know that as well, has the ability to suspend that mail ballot because we track every single mail ballot that we issue, and offer him a regular ballot. In past election, it was a provisional ballot if Senator Hueso could not surrender his mail ballot. Now we have the ability to suspend that mail ballot and offer him a regular polling place ballot that he can vote and drop into the ballot box. So that is a significant difference. We see the total number of provisional ballots to go down because by far the total number of provisional ballots cast is because a voter cannot surrender their mail ballot. And because the electronic poll book, if you will, cures that issue, we now have and see the total number of provisional ballots is going down in this upcoming election. Where we see the total number of provisionals going up are those conditional voter registration situations where a person did not register by October 19th. Okay, so this is just a semblance of what you should see. Here's what it looks like from a traditional voting precinct format. And as you can see, as we're consolidating polling locations that is going to be out there, what you see is bigger regions of the county based off of ballot types is one big consideration, those 842 ballot types that we have to take in consideration. And once we're able to combine those based off of your respective contests that you're eligible to vote on, then we can strategically cite where the polling location, the physical polling locations, needs to be throughout the entire county. Okay. Now, let's go into the voter education and outreach effort. Early August, we sent every single registered voter a direct mail. This is what it looked like, informing all of you effectively what I'm saying today is that this election is different. There's going to be, every voter is going to receive a mail ballot. There are going to be fewer locations come election day, but those locations are now going to be open for 4 days as opposed to 1 day. And also how you can vote safely in the comforts of your home. Also was provided was for you to verify your residence address and your mailing address on file with our office so we could get you your mail ballot during the first push of sending out mail ballots that were out there as opposed to it getting delayed. Okay. So sample ballot pamphlets started going out, and that started going out on September 24th. You should start receiving that if you haven't already. We sent 180,000 by email because people signed up to receive their pamphlet electronically. And then as yesterday, being 29 days before Election Day, voters should start receiving their mail ballot yesterday and throughout the rest of this week. And if a voter does not receive their mail ballot by October 14th, we're asking them to contact our office. Okay. Now, If you've opened and received your mail ballot, you should see something new. This area right here, these two first pages, this is the front and this is the back, is what we call the wrap. It tells you everything about the election itself, why you're getting a mail ballot if you're normally not a mail ballot voter, the fact that you can track your mail ballot, as you can take ownership of safeguarding your mail ballot, because you can now subscribe to Where's My Ballot, going to sdvote.com. You provide us your email or a cell phone number, and you can get notifications about the status of your mail ballot as it's getting to you and delivered to you, or after you voted it, getting it back to our respective office and when we've accepted it and counted that ballot. Again, it's really easy. It's kind of like FedEx, UPS, or the U.S. Postal Service's parcel tracking system that's out there. No difference. That second page here also lists your closest mail ballot drop-off locations. Should you not want to drop it off through the U.S. Postal Service, even though that's my recommendation, because in that mail ballot packet that you will receive is a postage-paid return envelope inside of it already, okay? So you don't have to put a stamp on there. We've given you all the incentives to really vote at home, vote safely, drop it off at the closest collection box that the U.S. Postal Service has, which there are thousands of those as opposed to the 126 mail ballot drop-off locations that we have. Now, I should also mention right here, you can't see it here, is where your I voted sticker is going to be as well. Okay. Now, let's talk about trusted sources really quickly. There are good practices of voting your mail ballot, clearly marking it with blue or black ink, signing the back of the envelope and sealing the ballot inside the envelope and returning it to a trusted source. Our trusted sources for you that we recommend is the U.S. Postal Service, any of our mail ballot drop-off locations, or any of our super polling locations that are out there. Okay, and the mail ballot drop-off locations program started today and will run through November 3rd. Our super polling locations will open on, and there's 235 of those, will be opening on October 31st, and will stay open through November 3rd at 8 p.m. And all voters, again, are assigned to one of those 235 locations. Now, we will also be sending out a postcard to those individuals that we do not receive their mail ballots at a specific point in time. This is what it's going to look like. Again, apprising them of what their options are, as well as where their a polling location is going to be, should they want to go to a polling location to vote. Now, let's talk about additional voter education. I've talked about this is the most comprehensive and robust voter education and outreach. Let me just kind of go through it. And this was kind of a storyline here. We're wanting voters to be ready in terms of this election. We started asking people to verify their registration, re-register to vote, check their registration, register and make sure that we have everything accurate on our files for you. Again, we're notifying people that they should start receiving their mail on October 5th and how to vote that mail ballot. And again, part of the whole storyline here is sign, seal, return your ballot to a trusted source, as that's the preferred method of voting safely in this upcoming election. Now, because we couldn't use high school students in this upcoming election, I just know that we've engaged them in other ways, and they've actually created some of this artwork that you see here and creatives of marketing it. So we've done a blitzkrieg of advertisements on all the different formats across even the local newspapers that are out there. And as I mentioned, everything that we do in English, we do across all the other 4 federally covered languages that you can see here. You can track your ballot. I've already talked with you about this, about the Where's My Ballot, but know that the U.S. Postal Service also has a service where you can get a scanned image that you can get to your email box that you get every day in your inbox through your email account of every piece of mail that you should find in your mailbox that day. It's called Informed Delivery. I'm subscribed. It's a great tool. I would say that, and it's free, and you can just simply go to the U.S. Postal Service on that. I won't go through these key dates because really we're winding down. We're at October 19th is the next big milestone, which is the registration deadline. The next after that is the super polls locations and then the certification itself. And let me just get to the final slide here. You could really help us out. As I mentioned before, there are 2 key pieces of success in terms of conducting elections for all of you. One of those is conducting it with the utmost integrity, security, transparency, and accuracy, and balancing that with the pandemic and doing it in a safe and healthy way. But the other aspect of this is communicating about these changes to the public. I do not want to have any one of our 1.9 million registered voters be surprised in this election. So please do speak with your friends, your family, your neighbors, any other organizations that you belong to about these changes that will be happening. And if there is any questions about how information about the election, as opposed to hearing what there is occurring nationally, go to our website, sdvote.com, contact our office to really get fact from fiction, and let us demystify any questions that are out there about how this election is going to be conducted for our county. And then know that you can track, sign, seal, and return your ballot to a trusted source. And then again, alternatively, if you want to go to a polling place, fine, but our focus here is voting that mail ballot and get it back to us. With that being said, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that the audience may have and turn it back to Senator Hueso.
Thank you, Mr. Vu. That was a fantastic presentation, very thorough. You actually answered a lot of questions that I had here. But I do appreciate you mentioning that back in 2018 that we passed AB 216 to add postage to ballots so that every ballot will not need postage. I used to put postage on my ballot in the past, but no postage necessary anymore. That's a very important point. Also, I was always wondering why have polling locations if it's going to be all ballot, and because of COVID, we want to just encourage people to vote from home. But I guess you answered those questions, that it's going to be very important to account for the people that don't receive a ballot or that are having other circumstances that prevent them from either voting during the or allowing them to vote through ballots. The dates of voter registration is very important. And we know that if somebody decides to register at the very last date, will they be given a ballot there? Or are they going to be directed to vote somewhere at the point when they register? Or how will they receive information so close to the election?
So if a person is not a registered voter, Senator Hueso, they can, by the October 19th, so starting on October 20th, we'll go into the conditional voter registration period. They can certainly go to our office here at 5600 Overland Avenue between October 20th and October 31st and register and vote same day. So if they came onto campus here, we would be able to register them. And after they register, we'd be able to have them vote a provisional ballot. Now, if they want to wait, they can go to their assigned location starting on October 31st, and we would say act early for all voters to act early and consider voting prior to just election day because of the pandemic and to avoid crowding. But they can go and exercise that same option at their assigned location of the 235 that we have out there.
And for people that are going through name changes for whatever reason, name changes often take several months to process, in some cases a year. And that may happen during the election time. What do we tell those voters? That they have to re-register? What if it's after the 19th? Will you accept a ballot with somebody's previous name?
Yes, we do. That happens every election where a person has gotten married, changed their name, whatever it may be, and we know them as a specific name on file. They didn't re-register on time, but because we have the ability to look at, and we liberally construe in favor of the voter as requirement by law, that we are looking at other factors when we're allowing this person to, as we're verifying the person's signature off of a mail ballot. So name changes, if it occurs during the election, great. Now is the time to, frankly, re-register to vote under your new name. But if you don't do so, you can certainly do that through the re-registration process, conditional voter registration process after October 19th. As I would say, if it's a name change and that's simply it, you might want to just wait until after election day.
Okay, and if somebody is turning in a mail-in ballot, they can turn it in the post office. They can also turn it in to a polling location. Am I correct?
That's correct. So there's three options, at least for us, as in terms of a trusted source. Post office, thousands of collection boxes out there. Any one of our drop-off locations, there's 126 of those throughout the entire county. 125 of them are running right now. And then 235 locations between October 31st and November 3rd.
And you don't have to necessarily drop it off at your polling location. You could drop it off at any polling location.
Any of the locations throughout the entire county, yes.
Okay. And one question that is often brought up regarding the post office. If I drop off my ballot on election day at the post office, and every post office box has a pickup time, let's say it's 4 p.m. And if I drop it off at 5 p.m. after the pickup time on that date, is it considered late, even if I got it into a post office facility?
That's correct. According to our conversations with the U.S. Postal Service, if you drop off that ballot through the U.S. Postal Service after they pick up mail from that collection box, it would get postmarked the following day. So our recommendation, and it's also in the mail ballot packet, is to always do it 7 days in advance. That way there's just a clear demarcation as to and postmark on that ballot as it's traveling back to us. Plus, the other aspect of this is I know that voters are interested in getting that ballot into that first count, because at a specific point in time, if we're not able to receive that ballot, we again have to go through the process of verification, opening it up, scanning it into our tabulation system. And so that ballot may not show up in the first election night results reporting, but a subsequent reporting during the certification period, which is that 30-day window.
It would, I really appreciate your very, very thorough presentation. I think you covered almost every point. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I just wanted to thank you for doing this. And I know if people have questions, they can call the registrar. Is that correct? They can call my office. They can call the registrar for more information. And
That's
just
correct.
Yes, and just primarily, I think here in California, we want everybody to vote. We want everybody to participate. That's why we're trying to create so many rules to capture every single possibility of why anybody would be stricken from eligibility. We want to make it certain, that's at least from my standpoint, and from what I'm hearing from you, Mr. Vu, you're going out of your way through your office to make it convenient for people to vote, to make voting accessible, to make sure that everybody gets the information they need, the ballot, that we facilitate this process so we can get everybody to vote. That is the goal, and my parting message to everyone listening is please vote. Whoever you vote for, please just vote, participate. If you are experiencing any difficulties that will prevent you from voting, just call my office, call Mr. Vu, call any of your local representatives to get information, call the registrar of voters, be informed. Don't lose this opportunity to express your vote and your position on matters, and we'll conclude this. And thank you again, Mr. Vu, and everyone listening. And we hope everyone has a lot of success in participating in this historic election.
Thank you so much, Senator Hueso. Bye now.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.